A new book that is coming out by Donna Brazile, the former acting chair of the Democratic National Committee, that the campaign of Secretary Hillary Clinton was far more influential at the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, than we previously knew. Do you think, though, that what we're learning from Donna Brazile's book suggests that the campaign, that what the Democratic National Committee did, meant this election was rigged?
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Well, what we have.
It's a pretty powerful.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was.
Rigged.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Well, what we have to focus on now as Democrats is we recognize the
charge.
Well, what we have to.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Well,
I agree. That is a pretty powerful charge. And this is one of my favorite clips, which is why I play it so often. Do you think this process was rigged? I think it was. And then a pause. That's a pretty powerful charge. Yeah. Yeah, that is a pretty powerful charge. One of the major political parties essentially cheated one of the people running in their race because they didn't consider him a Democrat in one respects, and also it was Hillary Clinton's turn. And to put it in perspective, and don't misunderstand me, Elizabeth Warren on the very next day came back and said, oh yeah, it wasn't rigged. I know the thing that I said the very previous day that it was rigged, but now I changed my position to it was rigged. I talked to the Democratic Party. I misunderstood the signals that they were giving me on this. And so I need to kind of dial this back and say it wasn't rigged. I repudiate my statement from yesterday. I have evolved. I want to show you. In fact, I just want to read it to you. Donna Brazile, what they're talking about, what they're referencing. Because Elizabeth Warren here is not a lunatic. Donna Brazile comes out with a book. And not just that, as she's hawking the book, she shows a chapter of the book on Politico. And anybody that reads it shows that this was cheating. This was insider baseball to some degree. Hillary Clinton had complete control of the political apparatus and a system that was supposed to be impartial. Anybody in their right mind, stopping there, not going anywhere else, anybody in their right mind looks at that and says, yes, this person had a dramatic advantage in this process. And that it doesn't even just stop there. You're talking about people who essentially was in the party that just wanted her to win and bent over backwards to do so. Whether you want to talk about media, and yes, in the political space itself, including in this particular primary, whether it's in some respect shutting down primaries. And yeah, maybe even going so far as to the elections themselves. This was problematic, to say the least. I'll do this on the other side. I want to talk about the context of this, though. Because ultimately, because of this, and because of the way Tom Perez perceived this, and the way they talked about this, meaning in the entire time during the point where they were going for the election chair, the person who was going to lead the Democratic Party, they always talked about this in ways that did not line up with reality. They didn't want to own up to the fact that they cheated. So they would say, oh, there was an appearance of impropriety. No, Tom, it was impropriety. And every time you lie about it, it bugs me that much more. And I have to be honest, I knew this was going to have weird effects because the way they were talking about it and the logic that they were going to use extending from the way that they were talking about it, not actually from the real thing itself. Reality didn't matter. We don't want to own up to the fact that we cheated. That burns too much. So what we're going to do is ignore the fact that the person who was chair of the DNC before me, hawking a book, attests to such. Reality doesn't matter. We can't own that. That hurts too much. We can't lose an election. We can't lose 1,100 seats. We can't lose the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. And if RGB drops 3 Supreme Court seats, one of which was stolen. We can't take all that and take the burn of owning up to the fact that we cheated in the procession of all that. Meaning, All of this was the consequence. And not the consequence of the cheating, but it's like all of it happened essentially at the same time. We can't own that. That's too much. That's too much. That is the feather that breaks the back. Too much. So there was an appearance of impropriety. Why? Because we didn't have enough debates. That's not why, Tom. But that is the logic that Tom Perez was using. So what did the DNC do? We're going to be fair. We're going to be fair. We're going to be absolutely fair in this process. We're going to show you that we're being fair by having 1 billion debates. And we're going to have these weird rules dealing with polling and dealing with the amount of money a candidate can raise to make sure everybody knows that it's fair. There's no appearance of impropriety in this particular way, like there was an appearance of impropriety in the last thing in 2016. See? Clean hands. Bam! Mic drop. Tom Perez. Any Sanders supporters knows that's nonsense. It wasn't the debates, Tom. Yes, in part it was the debates because you only had 3 and you're trying to hide her. But it wasn't just the debates. It was the issue. And now we are here, 2019. And you have a Democratic race with 1,000 people in the race that's running. And the DNC, based on the logic of the previous thing that was wrong, that was Orwellian of sorts, has now applied some weird logic to this. And so you have people who, by all metrics, should qualify for the debates, excluded from the debates, because from Tom Perez's logic, we got to be completely fair. You're using polling. And then you find a situation where the polling is not even coming out. So the number of polls that they told them that they would be able to use gets whittled down to 10 and then to 5. Because they got to be fair. They got to be fair. I want to talk about the DNC excluding Tulsi Gabbard and Jamarl Williamson. And I want to talk about the weird, strange logic that is being based off of something that is absolutely fictitious. And not just based on something that's fictitious. This notion of fairness in the context of something where they're just getting it wrong. Meaning, in order to be fair in this process, we're going to exclude other people who, by all metrics, qualify in any real terms. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content and you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please like this video, share this video. And of course, it goes without saying, subscribe. And if you really dig it, please consider supporting through PayPal or Patreon. I want to read Donna Brazil's own words, former chair of the DNC, former person that got fired from CNN for passing notes to the Hillary Clinton campaign. She's a party insider. Before I called Bernie Sanders, I lit a candle in my living room and put on some gospel music. I wanted to center myself for what I knew would be an emotional phone call. I promised Bernie Sanders when I took the helm of the Democratic National Committee after the convention, I would get to the bottom of whether Hillary Clinton's team had rigged the nomination process. As a cache of emails stolen by Russian hackers and posted online suggested, I'd had my suspicions from the moment I walked in the door of the DNC a month earlier based on the leaked emails. But who knew if some of them might have been forged? Debbie was not a good manager. She hadn't been very interested. I love this. She hadn't been very interested in controlling the party. She let Clinton's headquarters in Brooklyn do as it desired, so she didn't have to inform the party officers how bad the situation was. How much control Brooklyn had and for how long was still a situation, or what the situation was. How much control Brooklyn had and for how long was still something I had been trying to uncover for the last few weeks. By September 17th, the day I called Bernie Sanders, I had found proof, and it broke my heart. Broke her heart, broke her as a woman, as a Democrat. The Saturday morning after the convention in July, I called Gary Gensler, the chief financial officer of Hillary's campaign. He wasted no words. He told me the Democratic Party was broke and $2 million in debt. What? I screamed. I am an officer of this party, and they've been telling us everything is fine, and we were raising money with no problems. That wasn't true, he said. Officials from Hillary's campaign had taken a look at the DNC books. Obama left the party $24 million in debt, $15 million in the bank debt, and more than $8 million owed to vendors after the 2012 campaign, and had been trying to pay it off very slowly. Obama's campaign was not scheduled to pay it off until 2016. Hillary for America and Hillary Victory Fund, its joint fundraising vehicle with the DNC, had taken care of 80% of the remaining debt in 2016, about $10 million, and placed the party on an allowance. Just to take an aside here. And yes, I'm being laborious because I want to make an extreme point before I go to my other point. A candidate that was running in the Democratic Party in the race, meaning she is not within the party structure itself. She is a thing within it. She's not metadata. She is data. She is an aspect of that program. She's not the underlying class. I hope you understand the point that I'm getting at. She is in a particular process that is supposed to be impartial. And that exact same person that is in a process that is supposed to be impartial is putting the party, the thing that controls the process, on an allowance. How can a thing that is supposed to be impartial be in an odd way on an allowance by somebody that is supposed to be running in that thing that's supposed to be impartial? Wouldn't that just kind of kill and destroy any notion of impartiality the moment that the person who's running in that thing is also controlling the thing to which they're running in? But hey, right, no cheating, right, Tom? Let's keep going. If I didn't know about this, I assumed that none of the other officers knew about it either. That was just Debbie's way. In my experience, she didn't come to the officers of the DNC for advice and counsel. She seemed to make decisions on her own. On the phone, Gary told me that the DNC needed $2 million loan, which the campaign had arranged. No, that can't be true. The party cannot take out a loan without the unanimous agreement of all the officers. Gary, how did they do this without me knowing? She is the chair. She's the head of the party, of the DNC. I don't know how Debbie relates to the officers, Gary said. He described the party as fully under the control of Hillary's campaign. I'm not saying this. Donna Brazile is saying this. She's hawking a book. Yes. But do you think that this party hack is just going to outright lie? No. The DNC was under the complete control of Hillary Clinton, the person that was running in a race in the DNC, under the auspices of the DNC. How are you telling me with a straight face that this is a fair and impartial process? When the DNC was being sued for fraud, these guys got into a courtroom and said we can lie and choose candidates in a smoke-filled room. No law is broken in that process. The point that people were trying to make in the sense of fraud is that if I am giving to Bernie Sanders, I am giving to Bernie Sanders under this thought that the process is fair. Because one smiling, grinning idiot after the next tells me this process is fair and impartial, and if you try to say otherwise, you suck. You are being a sore loser. You're just making this up. You guys are just angry and bitter, and you guys are just hurtful and trying to sling arrows at our process that is pure and impartial and without blemish. Vote Hillary. If I'm giving to Sanders in a process where he is running along with Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton has control of the process, and everybody in the entire way is telling me that it is impartial, then you are lying to me. You are defrauding me. And to some degree, there's a business interest involved, despite it being a political thing, since the Democratic Party is a corporation. Let's keep going. There's more. That's not even the worst of it. And right here, money laundering. This is the best part. This was exposed months ago, by the way. Almost a year before this article came out, the money laundering was exposed in Politico and Counterpunch. This was already known. But let me read it so you can understand. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving it money every month to meet its basic expenses, while the campaign was using the party as a fundraising clearinghouse. So understand what's being done. Hillary Clinton is using an allowance to essentially control the DNC, meaning I have you on life support and you will suffocate if you don't do what I say. It's a leash of sorts, while simultaneously using the party as a fundraising vehicle to skirt around rules against the amount a candidate can be paid. Yes, it's money laundered by any stretch of the imagination. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving him money every month to meet its basic expenses, while the campaign was using as a fundraising clearinghouse. Under FEC law, individual can contribute a maximum of $2,700 directly to a presidential campaign, but the limits are much higher for contributions to state parties and party nominate national committees. Individuals who maxed out their $2,700 contribution limit to the campaign could write an additional check for $353,000 to the Hillary Victory Fund. That figure represents $10,000 each of the 32 state parties who were part of the Victory Fund agreement. $320,000 and $33,000 to DNC. The money would be deposited in the states first and then transferred to the DNC shortly after that. Money in the battleground states usually stayed in that state, but all other states funneled the money directly to the DNC, which was quickly transferred to Brooklyn because, again, Hillary had the DNC on life support. She could do what she wanted. In this case, the money that was supposed to go to the state parties ended up in Brooklyn to Hillary Clinton. Only a very small percentage, like 1% of the money that was supposed to go to state parties ended up at state parties. Hillary Clinton got the rest. What? I said. That victory fund was supposed to be for whoever was the nominee and the state party races. You're telling me that Hillary has been controlling it since she got the nomination? Gary said the campaign had to do it or the party would collapse. Again, she had them on an allowance. And if they didn't do it, they would suffocate. They were on life support. In giving them allowance, the DNC only had just enough to get from point A to point B. That allowed Hillary Clinton an outsized control over the DNC. The money that they were getting from the state parties was supposed to go to whoever won. Clinton was taking that money. And the state parties were only getting a small percentage. I think it was like 2%, 1 or 2%. Yeah. Say what you want about Clinton. She's not Biden. She's not sundowning. Not in this way. She is running that game like a pimp. And the DNC was essentially her bitch. I like that. I like the way that sounds. The DNC was Hillary Clinton's bitch because that's essentially what is taking place. This is not me saying it. This is Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile, party insider. Donna Brazile. This is what she found. I have a point. Even though it's a long one, I know. I'm making a point. I want to make this extraordinarily clear. That's why I'm doing this. Yes, it's painful, but I want it to be painful. Gary said the campaign had to do it or the party would collapse. That was the deal Robbie struck with Debbie. He explained, referring to the campaign, Robbie Mook. Now, this is a stitch-up. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a close friend of Clinton, if I'm not mistaken, ran her campaign at one point. So the person who ran her campaign becomes head of the DNC. That person makes a deal with Hillary Clinton that turns the DNC into a submissive partner, perpetually on its knees. Debbie didn't have to strike that deal. Debbie struck that deal because she's friends with Clinton, and that's what she wanted to do from the standpoint of allowing the DNC to work in coordination with the campaign. Call it what it is. It's corruption. It's not even good corruption from the standpoint of, where you have all those intervening layers. This is straight on. You can see it. It's very clear and plain. What's the burn rate, Gary? I asked. How much money do we need every month to fund the party? The burn rate was $3.5 million to $4 million each month. I gasped. I had a pretty good sense of DNC operations after having served as a chair for 5 years. Back then, expenses were half that. What happened? The party chair usually shrinks the staff between presidential elections. But Debbie chose not to do that. Right here. And this is like one of the most damning parts. Right around the time of the convention, the leaked emails reveal Hillary's campaign was grabbing money from the state parties for her own purposes, leaving the states with very little to support down-ballot races. A political story published in 2016 May described the big fundraising vehicle she launched through the states summer before quoting a vow that she made to rebuild the party from the ground up. Meaning, Hillary Clinton is saying, I'm going to rebuild this party from the ground up, while simultaneously taking all of the money, leaving the states 1%. Yes, the woman that derided Sanders saying he's not helping the party, left the states 1% of the money, funneling the rest into her own campaign. $82 million they took. They took $82 million. Now, let's talk. Why am I bringing this up? Why am I bringing this up in this laborious way? Because Tom Perez has created a system of a debate that is based on 2016. And what he's basing 2016 from his perception of things, at the very least his stated political perception of things, is that there was no cheating in real terms. But there was an appearance of impropriety. There was an appearance that something was wrong. It just looked that way. People who was observing this from outside of objective reality of that sense. It just looked like it stunk. But it didn't actually stink. It just looked like he took a shit on a lawn. He didn't actually do that. Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe me, Tom Perez. Believe me. What about Donna Brazile? Can we believe her? I just read to you. I am not even finished this, by the way. There's more. I guess my point is just even up to the point to which I read, Donna Brazile is talking about flagrant cheating. This is a process that was supposed to be impartial, and you continuously lied through your teeth, all of you, saying it is impartial, and if anybody says otherwise, you guys are just sore losers. Not so much. If you want to make the argument that the cheating wasn't why Sanders lost, you can make that argument, but let's just at the very least agree that objective reality that he was being cheated. So if Tom Perez is going to take this argument and say, there was an appearance of impropriety, and there were only 3 debates, so I need to have 1,000 debates. What's wrong with this process? The logic is wrong. It wasn't an appearance, Tom. It was cheating. People's issue was the cheating. The thing you didn't deal with was the fact that you guys cheated. The thing you didn't deal with was the fact that you were in court saying you could lie and cheat. Whatever you wanted to do in smoke-filled rooms. We are a corporation. We are not subject to, all of this fairness nonsense. That's not what you dealt with. You dealt with something that was a curmudgeon, a unicorn. And as such, you've ended up with these weird debating rules, with this point being to give the appearance of fairness and equity in regards to the candidates. I don't like thinking about 2016. I don't like it at all, because I have horrible feelings about the Democratic Party in 2016. The lying, the cheating, the continuously gaslighting, telling people that you weren't cheating when everybody in their right mind knows you were cheating. The documents that came out from WikiLeaks showed you were cheating. Donna Brazile said you were cheating. Everybody said you were cheating. And yet all of you lied. And based off that lie, you set up a debating system with the appearance of fairness because people had the appearance of impropriety. All with this notion of trying to create the notion of fairness. And in that process, come up with debating rules that exclude certain candidates. That from a system of fairness, where you're trying to say, look, we want people who have a certain degree of support in the polling and in financial affairs. The person gets that, and you exclude them. because you want to create the appearance of equity. Do you see how weird this is? I don't like bringing up 2016. I don't like bringing up the fact that you cheated, but you're bringing that up. You're bringing that up because your debate rules ensconced in the rule itself, and the weirdness of the rule harkens back to 2016, where you guys lied and cheated, and then come up with these weird debate rules to give this kind of appearance of equity. You are excluding people from the debate that probably should be on that stage. Marianne Williamson put out a document. In that document, she makes the point that the Democratic Party told them they will be using 17 polls to determine who gets on the third debate, or who gets in the debates. 535, Nate Silver's thing, ends up saying, well, look, these guys are really only using 10 of the 17. Meaning that in a race where it says, look, we're going to give you guys 17 polls in order to make the determining factor. These are good scientific polls to give us a good idea on who has support. And that's what we're looking for, support. We want to ensure that there's a financial basis for the support and that there is a polling basis for the support. That's what we want. Equity. Great. An appearance of equity. Great. Problem. The 17 polls never come up, meaning you only get to use 10. And of that 10, you only really get to use 5 because after the debate, only 5 polls were available. Meaning there are people who may have the support. Because when you look at other polls that are just as scientific, just as good, just as credible, use just as good methodology, if not better, they're excluded. So a candidate who's running in the race, who's told by the Democratic Party that they would get 17 polls to determine whether or not they can get into the debates, only get 10. And of that 10, they really only get 5 between the second debate and the third debate. And that same candidate says, well, wait a minute. There's a litany of polls that are just as good as the DNC polls that have me hitting the metrics that they are saying is necessary to show credibility. We've met the criteria in this regard. But we're being excluded because it's not the DNC's polls. And yet the DNC polls are not coming out in a regular way that would allow us to even validate the fact that we're credible, as is being displayed in the litany of other polls in this process. Tulsi Gabbard is hitting 2% in multiple polls, more than 4 polls. But again, only 5 polls came out between the second and the third debate. And so this litany of other polls don't necessarily come into play from the standpoint of allowing Gabbard in the race. So again, you guys can use 17 polls. It turns into 10 because that's all that's available. And then it becomes 5 because only 5 polls are available between third and the second and third debate. In order to give the appearance of equity, basing it off of the appearance of impropriety that was in fact propriety, meaning in order to deal with something that was a curmudgeon, Tom Perez made a specter of something that didn't exist because they didn't want to deal with the issue honestly and fairly, so they had an appearance of impropriety. So he needed to create this outright appearance of fairness, in which case you have the debates. And I don't begrudge the party in this case because it's not the easiest thing when you have 1,000 people trying to run. You have to figure out how do you decide who gets in. But the problem is the moment that you say, okay, we want to be equitable, then the point becomes, how do we have an equal and fair race? And you say, okay, how do I get people on the debate stage? It would be better if you would have just said, look, we need polls that are credible and that meet this particular criteria. Off to the races. Because there was no way for you to know how many polls was going to come out in the time frame. Meaning you end up with a situation where you're excluding people, not because those people are not popular, not because those people don't have a basis of support. It's proven just based on the polling and based on the money that they're raising and based on the people who are raising hell about what you're doing. No. Purely because of the system to which you designed. That system based off of the curmudgeon of false pretense in the past election. That's why I'm bringing that up. I'm not bringing that up for my own good. I don't like thinking about 2016, but again, I end up thinking about 2016 because you are excluding candidates with a system, not because they're not popular, not because they don't have the support, but your system itself is excluding those candidates. I hope you understand my point. It is unfair in the system itself, and that system itself is created off of something that the Democratic Party just conjured in order to cover actual impropriety. The very system that you've created brings up the chaos of 2016. And this system that is now excluding candidates, and that is literally what is taking place. The system itself is excluding candidates. You don't have 17 polls each time around between the debates. It's one thing if you had 17 polls that would come out between each debate where you can kind of see where the people are. That's not what it is at all. Your polls are just coming out in this kind of weird haphazard way. Some come out, some don't. And so now you just have 5 polls to give people an opportunity to play catch up. That's not fair at all. Like whether that's intentional shafting, or whether that's incompetence, or whether that's just a mistake. I'm not saying rigging in this process, so don't misunderstand me. I totally can go with this notion that it may be a certain degree of incompetence. But again, incompetence because you're not working on this honest basis of let's deal with the fact that we cheated a guy. You're dealing with entire optics. You don't entirely have this belief in you that cuts deep in you. So you end up with this nonsense of, okay, we're going to have, 2% here and 130,000. Arbitrary numbers. And not just arbitrary numbers, arbitrary polls. Arbitrary polls. You have 10 other polls that are just as credible, just as good, maybe even better. But the DNC says those not part of our approved polls. And you will use CNN's trash poll. CNN's poll is trash. You will use that. But these other polls that are just as good, if not better in regards to the methodology, to what they use, not acceptable. That makes no sense. That makes zero sense. Even if you want to go with this notion that, well, we started this process saying that this is what we were going to do. The problem is you reneged on that. You reneged on that. The candidates didn't renege on that. Us saying this is a problem, that's not our fault. That's your fault. You reneged on that. The DNC reneges. 17 was their number. Then it goes to 10, then it goes to 5. That's you reneging. I hope you understand my point. Me saying that the other polls should be expanded and added into the process is entirely because the DNC failed and reneged on the deal that it made with the campaigns. Marianne Williamson comes out with this. DNC uses only 10 polls, not the promised 17, to determine the debate qualifications. The Democratic National Committee announced on February a formal process for presidential campaigns to qualify for the 12 official debates. Part of that process by the DNC was designated the published work of the 17 pollsters as official. No other polls could be used to qualify for the debates. For the first 2 debates, candidates had to get 1% in 3 polls, and for the second 2, candidates had to reach 2% in 4. It was implied that the pollsters would field polls with regularity to offer the campaigns maximum opportunity to qualify right there. Right there. If you told them 17 and they only get 5, well, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a severe problem. And if your goal was fairness, you've missed the mark, buddy. You missed the mark massively. Because again, this was about an appearance of impropriety when there was actual impropriety. And so this was an appearance of equity. It's not about the appearance of equity, Tom. It's about the equity itself. Fairness. You told them 17 polls, and they only get 10. And then even less than that, because those polls aren't coming out with regularity. And because the DNC didn't make any deals to ensure that those polls will come out with regularity. How the hell do you come up with a process where you don't control the mechanism of the process? You don't control those posters. You have no idea when those polls are going to come out. How can you say 17 polls when you have no idea when those polls are going to come out with any level of regularity? You screwed up. Fix it. It is unfair, this process. If you told them one thing, And there's no opportunity for that thing, or at the very least, not a real one, especially for candidates who are getting their first showing into the public limelight. It was implied that the campaigns would field polls with some regularity. That did not happen. According to initial research on 538.com, only 10 of the 17 pollsters designated by the DNC have released presidential results since the criteria were announced in February. That's it. So now the 17 polls goes down to 10. There are other polls out there, but only now 10. The Williamson campaign met all requirements for the first and second debates, reaching the threshold of 65,000 unique contributors and the official polls at 1%. For the third and fourth debate, the campaign met the requirement of 130,000 unique donors. Williamson has achieved 2% in 4 polls, which should be enough for her to get into the third debate. However, only one of the designated polls by the DNC. Those polls that she achieved 2% are The Hill, her sex polling firm, NBC Mississippi poll, and St. Anselm University poll. If the DNC had followed the process and announced in February and kept to the promise of 17 qualifying polls, the lineup of the upcoming third debate might be very different. And that is the point. They didn't break the rules. The DNC did. And the DNC broke the rules in the sense of allowing these guys the maximum opportunity to qualify because they didn't control the polls. And so what started off as 17 goes to 10 and then goes to 5. And so people who are, let's say, at the low end of the totem pole and getting their first exposure to the American audience, those people are somewhat shafted in this process. They don't get the maximum opportunities. The DNC sold them out in this sense. It's one thing if it's 17 polls between each debate. Again, at that point, you get a clear view of, okay, what's the spectrum in regards to the support that the candidates get, and you get various polls in order to give you that. But if it goes down to 10, then that spectrum gets cut further. And then it goes down to 5, that spectrum is cut that much further. And then you see there are other polls out there that are just as good, but those don't count. If the DNC wanted to do this, what they should have said was any poll that meet this particular criteria, and the poll will be judged against a criteria, meaning we need all of these polls of a particular standard to do the job. These are Democrats, after all. They don't necessarily believe in the government taking over things. They believe in governmental control in regards to setting standards and everything else. Well, set a goddamn standard. Set the standard and allow the polling to essentially do itself. If the candidate can meet the threshold based on polling from a standard that you agree with in regards to the efficacy of the poll, then the candidate should be allowed in the race. I mean, come on. You broke the rules. You broke your own rule. These candidates are not insane. And I am greatly annoyed by this. And I'm not even annoyed insofar as I couldn't figure out initially why I was getting annoyed by this. And when I tried to do this story the first time, I ended up in a different spot. And I was like, why am I annoyed by this? Why does this annoy me so? And then I realized, oh, I know why. Because this is based on false pretense. This weird debate schedule and the rule set these guys are making. Again, I understand that there's a difficulty in trying to figure out how do you field 20 people when they're running into a race. And if you're going to use the strategy of the polling and the unique donors, okay, fair enough. I guess I don't have any big issue with that. But my issue comes in when you tell them that you can have 70 polls, meaning you have a spectrum that you can go by. And you don't do that. And then you cut it further, meaning you are limiting the number of people who can get on the debate stage artificially. Not in what it was supposed to be, a show of support, because those people showed that. But because the system itself is excluding various people. I hope you understand what I'm getting at. It is not that the candidates don't have support. It is not that they don't meet what the Democrats and the spirit of it wanted to accomplish. The system to which they constructed And that system that they constructed harkens back to 2016 and the Democratic Party lying with this notion of impropriety about debates. I don't like this party. I don't like this party. You lie, you cheat, you steal, and now at this point you're excluding a candidate based on what amounts to a lie and a gaslighting and telling the American public that you weren't cheated. Donna Brazile you're mistaken. Donna Brazile is mistaken about the cheating, even though she's laboriously going through it and explaining exactly how it was done. It wasn't cheating that Donna Brazile is describing. It wasn't rigging at all. It wasn't your lying eyes. It wasn't the documents that was released to WikiLeaks. Don't believe any of that stuff. Believe us, these hacks that's trying to get from point A to point B, and explain how they could lose 1,100 seats, how they could lose the House, the Senate, Supreme Court, how they could lose the presidency to a reality show host, how they could lose and fail this much. It wasn't cheating. Cheating is too much to bear. If I am being honest, you'd have gotten more bang for your buck by after the 2016 election coming out saying, you're right, we fucked up, and start a mea culpa from there. You'd have gotten a hell of a lot more respect, because if we're being honest, people get it. You wanted Hillary Clinton to win, so you were willing to cheat to allow Hillary Clinton to win. That makes sense to people. People understand that. That's one of those things where people look at that and say, okay, fair enough. That's exactly what they did. And it's something to say that we got it wrong. We're going to be better. You thought of us as the party of the rich. And it hurts us, it burns us, that we're supposed to be the party of the everyday person. The Republican Party is the party of the rich. We've done something magnificently wrong if that's the impression that you got of us. We're sorry. We shouldn't have cheated your guy. We're going to be better. We're going to have a new focus. We're going to have a new vision. If you ask us what the Democrats stand for, we're going to be able to tell you in clear terms what it is to be a part of this particular party. We will do better, and we will move forward in this process. Yes, we cheated. Yes, we wanted Clinton to get elected. Yes, we thought she was more electable. Yes, we thought Sanders wouldn't be able to make it to the public itself. Yes, we didn't think he could beat Trump. Yes, we were concerned that a guy who wasn't a Democrat getting into that particular position would fundamentally change what it means to be a Democrat. And our section of the party, the neoliberal wing, would essentially be relegated to the rafters. Effectively the same position that the left had been relegated to for the last 40 years. Yes, we were concerned. We'll do better. We will regain your trust. What I would tell you is that would have gotten you more bang for your buck. Honestly. Trust me on this. It has the ring of truth to it. And even if that truth is unpalatable, even if it hurts, even if it burns, even if people don't necessarily want to hear it, they would at the very least accept it, because you are affirming reality. And people like it when reality is affirmed, especially when they can see it with their own eyes. But when you gaslight them, they distrust you immensely. They dislike you immensely, because what you're telling them is in contradiction to what they know because of what they're seeing. You would have gotten more bang for your buck by being honest. Really, seriously, truly. And I understand the politics of it. This notion that, look, the public will come back around to us because Trump will be horrible. So don't give any ground. Hold ground. No, we didn't rig it. Tell Elizabeth Warren to say we didn't rig it. Elizabeth Warren goes out there and says we didn't rig it. We're going to hold the line. We're going to gaslight. We're going to lie. We're going to lie. We're going to lie. And so when Tom Perez gets up there, he says there was an appearance of impropriety. They had an appearance of things going bad. We didn't have enough debates. And Tom Perez gets in, and based off of that, what he was saying on the debate stage when he was fighting for the leadership contest, based on that, he constructs the debates the way that he's running it. The aggravation with the way you've organized this brings back memories of 2016. Not because you're necessarily overtly rigging it, but more so because you're basing this off of that. I hope you guys understand my point. What was aggravating me in this particular process was that all of this headache that has taken place from the standpoint of the way these debates are being organized was from a misconception, an intentional misconception that was being parroted, that was being put forth by the Democratic Party to dodge the fact that even their own person, hack, Donna Brazile, party insider, DNC chair, former person fired from CNN for passing notes, admitted that they cheated. Even the Navy, a branch of the military, a branch of our military, our proud, brave servicemen at sea, even the Navy itself comes out and says, when confronted with reality, just blunt, bare bones reality, oh my God, there are UFOs. There are planes out there. There are planes, pilots that are seeing things that we can't necessarily, that we don't know what they are. They're just doing things that our ships can't do. And they show it on video. Even the Navy, that is a secretive branch, essentially a black budget in regards to what we and the public see, even they come out and say, yes, and we're going to come up with a system that allow pilots to report it, because it will look utterly and entirely insane that the New York Times and Washington Post and all of these media organizations are having pilots on that are with the Navy talking about the UFOs that they were seeing. And Luis Elizondo talking about the UFOs that these guys were seeing. And they hid in the press talking about UFOs that they're seeing. And the fact that reporters are asking Trump, what about the UFOs? Congressmen are asking various, the military, what about the UFOs? Everybody's asking, what about the UFOs? It would be utterly insane for the Navy to say, we don't know what you're talking about with the UFOs. Even the Navy, a black branch of the budget, says, yes, we were seeing things out there. We had no idea what they were. They were doing things that our ships couldn't do. The pilots say that they were some kind of technology, and they would zoom off and leave our planes in the air as if they're standing still. If the person was in it, they would be crushed. Meaning the technology may be allowing them to move in ways that we can't necessarily understand, or they're drones. We assume that they're not us, but they might be. But I'm not going to give any more information on that. We have a process for it. My point is, even the Navy, when confronted with uncomfortable truth, an uncomfortable reality that for the longest time they've ignored and dodged, even when they're confronted with that truth on the pages of the press, when the people can see it, when the people can analyze it, and the people can come to some realization that these pilots are seeing something. Even the Navy looks at this and says, we can't outright lie in the face of this overwhelming reality. I mean, these people clearly know they were seeing something. It's in the press, it's in the media. People know. Congressmen are asking. It would be weird if when asked, we say, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. It would be weird, right? So the Navy said, we have a process now for that. Essentially confirming what's been out in the media. Even the Navy, when confronted with an uncomfortable truth, and the reality of it on the pages where everybody can see, comes out and says, yes. Even an uncomfortable truth like UFOs, the Navy says, yes, they exist. They can deal with the uncomfortable truth, especially when everybody else can see it. The Navy can deal with UFOs, but the Democratic Party can't deal with the fact that they got cheated. And despite the fact that it's everywhere, Donna Brazile herself said it, they still come back without the integrity that our brave servicemen have in the Navy and lie. They lie. And based off those lies, come up with this weird debating system that is built on a lie, that is now excluding people despite the intent of it being equity, meaning it is failing in its intent because it's excluding various people on the debate stage that meets the requirements by all other cosmic being looking down at this and figuring out the intent of the rule, meeting the intent of the rule. But again, the rule was created on a false pretext. That's my annoyance with this. It's the basis, it's the logic of the rule and where it came from. Krishna Blake, TYT article admits she told Cenk she will take big money in the primary. I have a link. How can I share it with you? Can't send links here. So I have that video. I do have the video. I mean, Cenk has been pushing that, but I do have the video. In fact, I need to see something. Because if Cenk has been pushing this notion that her and Sanders are the only two that aren't taking big money, and he knows that because she previously told him before he put out that tweet, then he is lying. If that's true, he's lying. I need to go back and see it. I need to validate. Donald Smead, let's see if we can get Bernie to speak out. Keep speaking truth to power, Jamal. Aw, thanks, Fletch Lens. Charles Pierre, if Bernie gets cheated and capitulated again, I'm going to laugh so much at you progressives who didn't build no solid movement and are left with this farce. Krishna Blake, Google Zach Schlucken TYT article warn. Will do. We'll do Krishna Blake. Charles Pierre, will do. Charles Pierre, you can laugh at us. Look, this notion that we didn't build a movement. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I often, human beings are, I'm off this dry, I'm sorry. Human beings are, we like to think that because we're thinking beings, you know, we have logic, we have, you know, our faculties of reason and those type of things. But that faculty of reason is along for the ride. It's not a thing unto itself. Logic doesn't really take you any particular way. If you built the robot and you made that robot extremely logical, the robot would just stand there having no ability to do anything because it has no feelings to guide the logic itself. If you were under an MRI and someone asks you a question, your emotions are engaged first. They can see it in your head. They can see it in your brain, like the brain waves, the way your brain changes when it's asked that question, and then the logic comes in. The logic is almost a liar in this sense. It is not the primary thing, even though it comes across as the primary thing. Your emotion is first. Think about it. When you do anything, how you experience it, you experience a snap of emotion. It just happens immediately. It gets even weirder than that, to be honest. I mean, before you're even aware of what you're going to do, and before you're even aware of that you're going to move, your body already takes on certain things. So you get up, you go get something to drink. But before you were even aware that you were going to do so, the muscles and everything else in your body is preparing to move, despite you not being consciously aware that you're making that choice. Shit's weird. It's awesome. My point is this. We are physical things, part of a physical world. We are no different than anything else in nature. And despite this notion of having logic and rationale, there's certain things that we can pull the reins from, but most things float to the lowest common denominator. There's a reason that things crystallize into a sphere in space. That's the lowest energy level of sorts. We are no different in this process. That's why we sit down as opposed to stand up. And when people who do stand up, it takes a conscious effort for them to do so. Sitting down is just a natural position in the sense of the lowest energy level. We're physical beings. We're part of a physical universe. There's certain objects where if you fill, let's say, like water with salt, and you get it super saturated with salt, it would look like a fluid. It would look like there's nothing in that water. The water will look clear and everything else. You can put one extra salt crystal and bam, it crystallizes. It's a weird phenomena in the sense where it takes a certain amount to create somewhat of a spark for something to pop off. It's not something that happens in and of itself. Movements and those things don't just happen in the context of happening. There's usually something that sparks those things and pushes those things. This movement, those people are there. Sanders' support hasn't gone anywhere. Now you can say that's not a movement, but it's something. You have a situation where there was people, you know, when Obama was in office, you couldn't even get him to talk about, Medicare for all. He ditched the public option as soon as he got in office. And you have a preponderance of Democrats that sign their name in the House for Medicare for all. Not saying they all mean it, But they will mean it if Sanders gets in office, because they wouldn't have a choice in such. Not saying that it's easy to do. I'm just making the point that you have a lot of people throughout the country. That is something. And you may say that is not necessarily a movement in the absolute sense of those people working in coordination with one another. But I wouldn't shirk it. That potential is there. It's only going to take a spark for all of those people to essentially coalesce. And this notion of Sanders and the way that he's running his campaign with this notion of a political revolution, and you're going to need movements and this type of stuff, he is turning the campaign and the presidency into a referendum pretty much on everything in American society in this sense, especially from the standpoint of the 99% to the 1%. If they shirk him, if they cheat him and all that stuff, fair enough. But let's just be very clear. The way he is running his campaign, especially if he was running the presidency, is not like previous presidents. He doesn't have this notion that he can do it on his own. In his mind, it takes dollars or pitchforks. I need pitchforks, in which case he is running his presidency to go after people who are against his objectives. And I strongly suggest to you that if Sanders gets in, what the Democratic Party know is he is untethered. And he will go after them just as much as he will go after Republicans if they are standing in his way. It may not be a movement in the sense of a civil rights movement, but let's just be very clear that those people are there and they haven't gone anywhere, nor are they going anywhere, and they're only going to grow. So, fair enough. Fletcher Lenz, keep speaking truth to power, Jamal. Thank you, man. Beltazar, the biggest problem is that if the candidates have popular support, they claim they could turn on MSNBC, on the mainstream media, and post their own town halls and debates online. So that's the issue, Beltazar. They sign agreements that disallows them to do that. One of the things that they were debating, for example, the climate change debate, they were trying to get a resolution to allow the candidates to have their own town halls and debate one another. Disallowed. In fact, Tom Perez came on in order to knock down that particular resolution, looking at it as an affront to his authority. So they're not allowed to, just based on the rule set of the DNC itself. Look, I think that's a problem in and of itself. The DNC, corporate media should not be in charge of a process that we are using to determine who we want for our presidency. That should be a C-SPAN thing. All of us, any of us, should be able to use that content. It should not be a profit-generating thing. I hope you understand what I'm saying. It's somewhat sick that this becomes a corporate media issue. I mean, the questions that are asked can be framed in the sense of the drug companies or whatever who are putting money into their coffers. Like, understand what I mean. Corporate media relies on money that it gets for its coffers, meaning advertising dollars and everything else. These are supposed to be news media who are supposed to be, to some degree, impartial, at the very least, between the candidates. Every impetus in the world is there. If the candidates are in the race, that would adversely affect that particular media channel. Meaning, the debate that is supposed to be impartial becomes not impartial just because of the incentives that are built into the process in regards to who would be more or less advantageous to the company to which is holding the debates. I hope you understand my point. The process becomes skewed just based on the fact that plutocrats are giving money to those media organizations. Those media organizations need that money to keep their doors open, and yet there are candidates in the race that are antagonistic to those aims, in which case there is a natural bias to be against those particular candidates and for others. In this case, somebody like Sanders. That should not be a corporate thing. It shouldn't be. If you want to say that, you need to limit the number of debates, fair enough, but it should be out into somebody else's hands and not in the hands of corporate media. That's just outright wrong. I'm sorry. Pop reality. On the debate stage, Bernie must say that when he was marching with King, yes. Warren was Reagan Republican, yes. Or Warren, with the help of the media, will win. Pop reality, yes. Yes, he has the... So, two things. He has to create division. That's true. Meaning, he has to somehow create a separation between himself versus Elizabeth Warren. But he can't do so in a way that's antagonistic. Otherwise, you're going to lose supporters for Warren. In the same way that African Americans identify with Obama, women are identifying with Warren. A lot of them are. It's not so much that the only reason they're voting for Warren is that she's a woman. It's more so that it's an emphasis on the vote. It's kind of like if I am an African American, I probably am going to vote Democrat. However, the fact that it's Obama and he's black, it's like, yes! Boom! Black president, bitches! It's that. But you would have voted for him anyway. Same thing with Warren. This, it's her turn stuff comes into play. Not like a Clinton, it's her turn, but it's still I want a woman in the White House. It supersedes in many respects all of the metrics in regards to, it's like people purchase a car for 20% of the utilities on a car. In this case, it's I want a woman in the White House, and she looks good as anybody else. And between her and Bernie, she's saying the same stuff as Bernie is to some degree. I mean, she calls herself a capitalist and everything else. And look, I'm on MSNBC. I mean, we're capitalists ourselves. I mean, we kind of like her. I mean, she's awesome. We hate Bernie. We want a woman. She's awesome. Vote her in. And so they run with it. They distrust Sanders. From their standpoint, Sanders looks like Trump. And people are like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Why do they say that? They're discrediting themselves. They are discrediting themselves. But it shows they're out of touch. They're out of touch, not just from the standpoint of not being able to see a distinction between one side having a hate rally and the other side having a love fest. From their standpoint, this stuff is based on class. Other people are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, these voters are different. Well, from their standpoint, they are not, because they're looking at this as an issue of class. They have $20 million each year. If you're getting $20 million each year, when you look out at the world, you don't have the vulnerabilities and the difficulties that many of the other people have in the population. The 98, the 99% of people in the population, you are separate and distinct for those things. So if there's a candidate that's out there that's pushing for the unwashed masses, well, that sounds like Trump voters, because Trump voters, Trump was using the unwashed masses stuff in order to get it. So maybe these guys are similar quality. They're uneasy with that. It scares the shit out of them. They don't like it. They can't see the difference, because to them, it's not a racial difference. It's an issue of class. And on this, they're right. The issue is class. Sanders must create a division between the two. He cannot create a division between the two in an overt attacking way. Those women identify with Elizabeth Warren. As such, you cannot attack somebody where people identify with them, because those people would take it as an attack on their own person. You can attack Joe Biden ruthlessly, actually, because people don't necessarily identify with Joe Biden. They were just concerned using him because they thought he could beat Trump. It was essentially, if people are so terrified of Trump, they say, look, we don't care about this vision stuff. We just need somebody who can beat Trump. We just need somebody who can do the job. He doesn't have to be good. He doesn't have to have policy. His policy doesn't even have to be in line with what we want. We just need him to beat Trump. So there's no, I just love him. I just think he can beat Trump. I can attack him on that. I can hit him relentlessly. Nobody feels any particular way. At least nobody feels any particular way that will vote for Sanders. So it matters not one iota. My job at that point is to put him down, is to essentially eliminate him in contention and break his knees so Sanders can move up. But you knew my politics from day one. I told you my politics. He is out of alignment with my ideology. As such, it would be weird if I supported it. By the same token, Elizabeth Warren, I don't trust Elizabeth Warren as far as I can throw her. And you might not be able to see it in the shirt. I have zero muscle tone. None. No muscle mass. I barely lift a stone. So that gets across what I think in the sense of trusting Warren. The fact that the corporate class trusts her so much, again, is something to be concerning. The fact that she's going to take money once she leaves politics. And again, I keep making the point, it makes zero sense to say I am not taking corporate money in the primary, but I will take it when I get out. That makes zero sense. You could build that grassroots base just as easily if you could take that money from those corporations in the primary. If you're not going to be besmirched in the general, why would you be besmirched in the primary? The truth of it is, Elizabeth Warren wants to stand side by side with Sanders and say, see, neither one of us are taking money. Because she understood that it hurt Clinton when Sanders can point to her and say, this woman is taking money. So, in a primary where people are skeptical of politicians who are taking cash, she comes up with a gimmick. a trick, a way of getting from point A to point B, political expedience. I'm not going to take money in the primary because I want to build a grassroots something. I will, however, take it in the general because I don't believe in unilaterally disarmament. It's a gimmick. The goal is to trap you with a candidate who you did not want. What I mean is you didn't want a candidate that was going to take money. And this candidate didn't take money in the primary purely because they knew that you didn't want them to take money. But now that they're out in the general, they're like every other candidate that you've ever had. Why on earth would you accept a situation where you get the exact same thing that you got prior, but you didn't like prior, and expect a different result? That makes zero sense. She is gaming you. She's tricking you. When people say they don't trust Warren, this is why. It's the political gimmicks. You know, they're not supporting Sanders and then lying about it when she had a secret contract with Clinton going all the way back to 2013. And then being disingenuous about the reasons as to why between Uyghur and everybody else that asks her. And then gets dicey about, like, how dare you bring up my record? You are in a political race. All we have is your record to bring up. We don't have the ability to look into the future. That's like saying you shouldn't look at Donald Trump's record when he was in president and you got to look forward. You will say that's utter nonsense. Donald Trump has said a lot of stupid stuff that you need to bring up. Well, same thing here. You didn't support Sanders. You didn't support my guy. And you asked me for your support at a time where you needed to. You know who did? Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard did. Tulsi Gabbard stepped down in order to support Sanders. You wouldn't do that. You didn't have the integrity, the moral courage. And the reason I say that has to do with Elizabeth Warren always calling herself like the second most progressive Democrat and essentially an echo of Bernie Sanders. And yet that echo wouldn't support the guy that has essentially allowed her the space to be her. Because if it wasn't for Sanders, there would be no Warren. Because she wouldn't have the stones to go out there on her own like that to create that space in the way that Sanders did. Why on earth would I support the echo when the real thing is in the race? You're being gamed. Elizabeth Warren is under the thumb of the Democratic Party every bit as much as every other candidate. And, you know, if you don't believe me, look at Sandy Rock. She didn't come on until Obama came out. She literally waited. A woman who called herself a Native American waited while during Thanksgiving, Obama's cutting a turkey on Thanksgiving when real indigenous people in the country are ironically still being shot and still having their land stolen from them. And Elizabeth Warren stayed mum. Sanders didn't stay mum. She did. I'm making a point that there are things that dig in people. And for her, it's an issue of party politics. This finger in the air in regards to where the wind is blowing. So one day she comes out, they rigged it. I think they did. And the woman's, that's powerful. Yeah, it is. It is powerful. And just as powerful, the very next day when Elizabeth Warren comes back and says, okay, they didn't rig it. She's under the thumb of the party in a way that Sanders is not. She's going to take cash. Sanders is not. This is not a one-to-one. If you have the opportunity to choose a candidate for the first time in your lifetime, for the first time in my lifetime, and I'm going to be 42 on Saturday, you get to choose a candidate that means it, that has been doing it for 40 years. I mean, for Jesus Christ, for God's sakes, the man was being dragged away at civil rights movements. The man is marching with Martin Luther King. He's real. She was a Republican, and a Reagan Republican, up to the point she was like 30-something years old. Why on earth would you trust the echo when the real thing is in the race? And I know that there are some people who may look at identity issues and say, okay, I think it's her turn and everything else. And fair enough. People choose the candidate based on whatever they choose their candidates by. But this is for people who are not there and are not making choices based off of, this guy has a penis, this woman has a vagina, let's go. I'm talking about people who, for the most part, choose their candidates and say, what are the policies? That's what I want. How's it going to affect me? That's what I want. This video is essentially for them. I would never get that group of people, and I don't even know what that distribution is. And I'm not saying that everybody is doing so for that reason. any more than I would say somebody was voting for Obama because he was black. I honestly do believe it's an emphasis thing, not a primary thing. There may be some people where it's primary, where they use identity issues, and they might say, well, all things being equal, I like her, and so she's perfectly suited to be that particular. So fair enough. I don't begrudge people for that. People vote for all sorts of reasons. I'm tailoring this, however, to people who aren't using identity as rationale. Why support the echo? Why support the echo? She can't be trusted. But Pop, he has to be careful on how he hits her, because it may have larger consequences. What brand of boom is that for your microphone? This is a Yeti, I believe. A Yeti. Balthazar. Only Jamal can shoehorn aliens into everything. I know, right, Balthazar? Well, I was trying to keep in mind, I don't record these shows in advance. Like, I don't have a script per se. It's more so there's some stories that dig in me, if that makes sense, where I'm bothered by it. I like stories that I'm bothered by because I don't like being entirely dispassionate from the story. If I'm bothered by it, the story just writes itself because I'm bothered by it for a reason. The reason that I'm bothered by it often is not an intellectual reason. I mean, it's not there intellectually per se, like right off the bat. It's there only when I start to talk about it. And so there's a stream of thought that goes along with what's being said. In that case, you reach for something. It's like you're reaching in the ether for a way to explain what you're trying to get across. And you can never really explain things in a direct way. You know, as human beings, I can tell you something, but me telling you something in somewhat of a flat technical way doesn't really get across what it is. Oh, it was a rough evening. Okay. What does that mean? What does rough mean to me? And will you ever be able to know what rough means to me? Oh, I had a difficult life. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? Those words, it is almost impossible to understand what the words mean in a direct way. You can only really do it in general terms. Yes, he had a difficult day. I know that in what he means, you know, I know what he means when he says it, but I don't know what he means. It's both. You need an analogy in order to make it stick. The analogy is the thing that all of us, into some way, experience. And even within the context of the analogy that you give, it's still a certain degree of subjectivity, but analogy gets it across far better than just the flat words. If I'm trying to explain how the DNC did something that was flagrant and perverse, you know, in a democratic sense, and they were found out about it, meaning they were exposed. It came out by Donna Brazil. It came out in WikiLeaks. Not to mention, we could see it. We could see it. What took place in Nevada, where they act like Bernie Sanders was throwing chairs while they just kind of stole the election in a sense. The way the superdelegates would go, where Sanders would win a state but end up not winning a state because you would add superdelegates. Like all of this stuff, the way, the superdelegates thing was used to essentially weed out grassroots support. It was dicey in and of itself in the way that it was constructed. I needed a way to explain how a flagrant violation that is clear and unobtrusive view of failing and cheating. And then after that, lying to try to cover up the cheating that everybody could see with their eyes. So bad that CNN even asked the question of, you cheated Bernie Sanders, right? I guess I'm trying to make the point that if you're going to have something like that, that's such an unobstructed view of outright cheating, and then turn around and say it is not cheating, well, that's kind of problematic. I'm trying to show that the Navy, when confronted with even UFOs, something that is so outrageous and that is so far beyond the pale in regards to politics, and something that for the most part the government has denied for God knows how long, even they, when confronted with that level of reality, that out there, stark level of reality, even they acquiesced and said, yes, those reports are right. But the DNC couldn't do it. Like, the DNC wasn't dealing with aliens. The DNC wasn't dealing with UFOs. The DNC was dealing with a clear, unobstructed view that the fact that they cheated. And the politics wasn't even right. Your politics would have been far better to just owning up to it. Honestly. Like, it makes people dislike you when you lie. And I understand this notion that, well, we just need to get from point A to point B, in which people will forget about it. But see, the problem is that people don't forget about it because of stuff like this. The moment that you base your system off of something that wasn't true in order to cover impropriety, vast, massive, brutal, undemocratic impropriety, and then gaslighting, like, you're better off just saying, look, we did it. Our bad. And what I would have given you is, you would have gotten more bang for your buck. There would have been people who distrusted you. There would have been people who said these guys are using this as a political gimmick. But one day after the next, as you move forward, you would bring people on your side. You've never atoned for that. And the debating schedule, to some degree, gets across how they never atoned for it, because the debating schedule in and of itself gets across, essentially, it's based off of something that was not true, and that was a cover story for massive, outright cheating. That's my issue, but that's where the alien came from. I wasn't trying to. It was just the thing that I could reach for to try to get across a stark example of how out of alignment they are with reality. When the Navy had to deal with this reality of people knowing, they just said, all right, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. We can't lie about this. The lie would be too great to bear, even for us and our mighty muscles at sea. Not the DNC. Not the DNC. Who can lie with a straight face, buddy? We can lie. We can lie when we need to lie. We're a corporation. We're a corporation. A.R. Francis, is there a link to Marianne Williamson's letter about the post? Yeah, it's below. It should be below this video. Check in the description box. The Twitter link right there. The status. Yeah, it's right there. Balthazar, all I'm saying is that they never needed to sign those agreements. Oh, I see. We saw what happened in 2016 cycle. They didn't need to play their game at all. Is that true, though? I mean, could they have gotten in that process without signing the agreements? I mean, at the end of the day, they are Democrats. I mean, and so they're working under the auspices of a party, which is essentially a corporation. That corporation has certain objectives in mind that they want to accomplish and all that other stuff. Can they run in the race without signing into the race? I don't know if they could do that. I mean, can they, Balthazar? Amir Farrow, Tulsi's next target is Warren, Dapple, Russia 2016. This is why I, in my heart of hearts, I had wished Sanders got Warren in the race. I'm sorry, got Tulsi in the race. Look, Superman needs a Batman. There is no Superman without Batman. In fact, when I am in my room and you see a light, you see the posters and stuff behind me, you see the wall and the way the wall is configured, you see, one of my other microphones. I don't like Amazon. I attack Jeff Bezos and the company to which, he underpays his workers and everything else. I am a paragon of virtue in regards to the Amazon thing. Only because I have a wife that does shop at Amazon. And that buys all sorts of shit from Amazon and fills my office with the stuff from Amazon. I can be a paragon of virtue because I have my Batman. Superman can be that way. Superman can be this paragon of virtue that stands there with his cape flapping in the wind. And he's just fucking perfect human being. He can be moral and ethical. Because Batman doesn't have those qualms with morality and ethics. Batman understands the truth that Superman doesn't. That the universe has no bias towards right or wrong. Those things don't really entirely exist in any context because those things are massively subjective to the people that are involved in the process. You ask 10 different people, you get 10 different answers. There may be certain things in a spectrum per se, but even that purely pertains to human perspective. Is it okay to eat meat? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask the cow says, fuck no. If you ask a person, that says those steaks are great. It's not absolute. If aliens came to the planet and decided to eat human beings, you ask a human being, is it right to eat humans? No, it's not right to eat human beings. You ask the alien, well, look, they're a lesser species. They kill each other. I don't see what's the problem. Yeah, We're okay with it, and they taste great. Depends on who you ask. Morality is not, in this case, an absolute. Right and wrong is not an absolute. What we can do, however, is look and say, what happens in the objective natural world based on the decisions that you take? You could do that part. Meaning, when Superman stands there as a paragon of virtue, Superman can't deal with certain problems in a real way because Superman has an ideology that forces him to behave in a particular way. Not being able to take certain options, meaning certain options are off the table in regards to his actions. Batman has no such problems. Batman doesn't believe that the world works in this kind of, if you're good, good will follow way. He understands that the world doesn't have a bias in that way. He understands that you have to do things that are not always the nicest in order to accomplish certain objectives. He allows Superman to be Superman. Meaning, Superman can be that idealistic person because Batman exists. In fact, Batman may even look up to Superman because of the way Superman is. Batman may love the fact that Superman has a certain ideology. He may respect the shit out of Superman because he had that ideology, while simultaneously knowing that the only reason he can be who he is that Batman is who he is. I was hoping that Tulsi was Sanders' Batman. I was honestly hoping that. Meaning, Tulsi goes in and takes down Kamala Harris. Missile. They hit Tulsi with anything and everything. She's a Assad apologist. She's a Putin puppet. She's this, she's that. But in this case, Tulsi's goal is not to win the presidency. Her goal is to push a particular agenda and push this the foreign policy thing and open the space to the left of the foreign policy thing. If Sanders needed room on this notion of foreign policy, Tulsi would be an awesome person to have in the debates to force him further to the left on foreign policy and give him that room as she's talking and dealing with the neocons that's on that stage, knocking them down in the arguments that they have in this case. She makes Sanders better. She opens up spaces for Sanders on this notion of foreign policy, especially on issues that we on the left care about because we don't like these interventionist wars anyway. She is a positive in that race. Sanders can't hit Warren. Tulsi can hit Warren. If Tulsi is Sanders' Batman, Tulsi can hit Warren, and it would have zero effect on Bernie Sanders. She could bring up Standing Rock. She could bring up the primary thing, taking the money and then going to take it after. She could bring up all the stuff that I've just brought up. She could bring up the reparations thing where, there is no such thing as reparations. She could bring up all of that stuff. None of it casts a dark light on Sanders. All of it is absolutely true. Just like she took down Kamala Harris with a bombshell of just truth. Tulsi could stand up there and just be Batman. And Sanders could stand there and be idealistic with his chin up, not wanting to get into the mud. Tulsi is not trying to win the presidency. Tulsi is trying to push the stuff to the left and conversation to the left. I was hoping that she was Sanders' Batman. Just being honest. Just being honest. Yeah, Balthazar, I added Superman and Batman to the aliens. Fucking A. And not just that, on point about it. On point about it. It's like, God, man, he pointed Superman and Batman. But the point that I'm making is a moral and right one. Like, it is absolutely true. There's no bias in the universe in this stuff. And people who have a certain ideology, I got to do good, I got to do good, I got to do good, are going to be faced with certain problems where doing good is always going to be put against your own best, interests. You're always in that situation. And if it's always this notion of doing good, in and of itself is not an absolute in and of itself. It depends on somewhat of an ideology by itself. Ethics, all this stuff depends on a certain ideology. Batman, when confronted with those problems, don't have those issues. He needs him to make the world work that way. Star Trek needs, 31, Office 31, Agency 31, essentially the CIA of Starfleet. They would say, look, in order for you to be who you are, I need to be the man on the wall. And in an odd way, I got to be honest, I think it's true. I think it's true. Yes, I added Batman and Superman, but my point is right. Kip Winter, Bernie and KY Sunday, Kentucky. This release was updated to 2 p.m. with the information that a deal on a new collective bargain agreement has been reached. Really? Nice. Sanders has been in Kentucky going after Mitch McConnell. I think this is a preview of what you're going to see if Bernie Sanders gets in office. I don't think it's like Obama, where Obama gets in office and says, all right, I take it from here, guys. Get the fuck out of here. I think it's, I can't pass the agenda that I told the American public that I could pass without galvanizing that public. Ergo, I am going to be in Kentucky, and I'm going to be in this state and that state, because I'm going to be rallying these people to go to their offices. I think you are going to have an assertive presidency that uses the mob for political effect. Not in a hateful, no, not like that, but more so in a protest and getting across, this is what we want, and compelling the political discourse. That's a new way of politics, man. Like, that's different. That's Nixon, with this thing of the people are surrounding the White House. His point is to get people engaged into the political process in a way that allows a perpetuity beyond him. He's talking about a movement, a hegemonic shift in the way that we talk about our political affairs, where what's came before, what's left over is different. The Overton window shifts. What it means to be a Democrat, different. He's trying to shift the left in the country. Democratic Party is terrified. They're terrified. I know some of you don't believe me because you don't like Sanders, but you are missing it. They are terrified. You can say I'm biased and all this stuff. Fair enough. You know my political ideology from that. And I can tend to be honest when, I think something is not necessarily best for Sanders, or when I think Sanders is going off the rails and all that other stuff. And I look at this, and it seems that they are terrified. The money that they are spending, the CNN, the media, that it's against them in this case. Even the meetings of anti-Sanders stuff. You don't do that stuff if you just don't care, or if you think the thing is innocuous, or if you don't think they can win. Sanders is hungry, and he wants it, and they know it. And it is a man that is hungry, that is for the first time getting the opportunity to gorge, and he is going to knock that shit out of the park, with Elizabeth Warren being the thing that could potentially try to stop him. Meaning the echo becomes his biggest challenge. Isn't that wild? It's like your bad impression. It's like the Wolverine movie, where a bigger, better version of Wolverine that is empty inside, fighting Wolverine. Wolverine eventually triumphs, but he was fucked up in that process. It's not easy fighting yourself, right? Especially a bad, younger version of yourself. Essentially an echo. Echo. Sparky. Rogan should stream Tulsi and Marianne commenting on how lame the debate is while watching with him like Mystery Science Theater 3000. Sparky, I wouldn't be surprised if Tulsi contacted Rogan and was like, look, they're screwing me over. I would not be surprised if Rogan would do it. Rogan has said, Tulsi is my girl. And I think he means it. And I think if he understood what was taking place, he would probably be bothered by it, seeing as he's had Tulsi and Sanders, and he's been open to having people on to discuss political issues. That would be powerful. That's a good point, Sparky. I like it. Baltazar, Build a Brand Workshop is closed for campaigning. Build a brand workshop. What? Jay Vale, Sanders seems to be distancing himself from her. How? I haven't heard him say anything about Warren. How? Look, Sanders can't do it per se. He needs to, but he can't do it overtly. Trust me on this. He can't do it overtly. They have different camps. And you have some people who identify with her every bit as much as they were identifying with Clinton, maybe even more. Clinton was massively unlikable. Warren doesn't have that very specific issue. And on a domestic front, she is saying what they want to hear. Meaning she's a bad echo of Sanders and calls herself a capitalist. Meaning, look, I'm not doing anything to really change the system like that guy. Meaning, she's a party insider. They love her. She may do some stuff with wealth tax and that type of stuff. And I do believe that she dislikes bankers. So I don't even doubt that point. I don't trust her. I don't trust her on foreign policy. I don't trust her on even domestic policy, especially if it's going to run roughshod or if it's going to run afoul of what the party wants. I don't trust her, nor do I think she can galvanize a following. And the worst case scenario to me is that I don't think she can beat Trump. I don't think she can do it. I know people think Trump is weak right now. Back in 2015, Hillary Clinton was beating Trump at this very moment by double digits. That didn't last at all. I understand the polling that is out at this point at a distance. That is a little bit different when the candidates are one side by side. And I don't think she can withstand it. And the worst case scenario in this is that you choose a bad echo that runs badly against Donald Trump. Meaning you choose Hillary Clinton in a year where it's an anti-establishment year. Meaning she starts off right off the bat at a disadvantage just because of what the audience wants and what the Democratic is forcing down their gullets. And in this particular case, you have a situation of another bad matchup with Warren and Trump. She doesn't match up well against them. Honestly, when these two get together, I think she will not get derided. In that situation, I think she'll get derided. I don't think she stands up. And so the worst case scenario in this is she loses. And you have all the Clintonites say, see, we told you, you can't run that far to the left. We told you, you commies, you socialists, get into the basement. Fuck out of here. Let the adults come back into the room, and all of the neoliberals and all of the people who are the Reaganites or Reagan Democrats now take over under this notion of electability. Electability, we're the adults in the room. We know previously Hillary Clinton lost the reality show host, and we lost the House, Senate, Supreme Court in 1,100 seats. We know that, but you just lost also. So now we can get back into the room. And Hillary Clinton didn't lose to Trump, it was the fucking Russians. She is the worst case scenario. She is the worst case scenario. If I'm going to lose, I want to lose with my guy. If you're going to hit me for losing with my guy. If you're going to say, you lost this guy, fair enough. But let me run with the real thing. Put the real thing out there. Let the real thing show itself. Don't run with the echo. Run with the guy that knows where he stands and that knows where he stands from the previous 40 years. Run with the real thing. She is the worst case scenario. Mark my words. It's not that I dislike Warren. I don't even think I dislike her from the standpoint of a person thing. It's more so I don't trust her. And it's like I don't trust her in the context of somebody who's there. I don't have to accept Warren because Warren is a bad echo. The real guy's there. The guy who opened up the space is still there. It is his ball. I'm going to give him the ball to run. He's earned that ball to run. Hillary Clinton stepping in as my turn didn't earn squat. He did. He created that space. The debates that they're having are based on, do you agree with Sanders or not? You should call every debate, do you agree with Sanders or not? Because that's what every debate is. He is calling for a radical transformation of our society. She is saying ditto-ish. Run with the guy that knows where he stands. Not to mention, do you even know what Warren wants on foreign policy? It's funny how they derided Sanders. Oh, he doesn't talk about foreign policy. It's Bernie bros and they're white. And then you look at the polling and it's like women of color, main supporters, and her white. And she doesn't talk about foreign policy at all. And Bernie Sanders has done multiple speeches on foreign policy to beef up the bona fides. All of these things need to come to the forefront. The beauty of Tulsi Gabbard is Tulsi Gabbard will bring up foreign policy and hit Warren on issues of foreign policy because that's her wheelhouse. It fits comfortably within her wheelhouse to do exactly that. I hope you're right. It would be awesome if that happened. Oh, and did her campaigns for slogans. Denise Gibbons, 53. Tulsi and Marianne Williamson should live stream Joe Rogan show. I bet Murray will listen. Maybe. Elizabeth Warren is your standard politician. That's all you need to know. Yes. I mean, What is the difference between Elizabeth Warren and everybody else in a general election? There isn't one. There isn't one. Whether you realize it or not, there isn't one. Yeah, there isn't one. She's going to take money just like every other politician. You're in a Democratic primary. There's an interregnum. You get the opportunity to choose. And you have one candidate who runs extremely well against Donald Trump. And you have another candidate that's lukewarm. And you have Biden who's sundowning. And you get the opportunity to choose who you want to run against Trump. Assuming for the moment that Biden flames out and you're left with Warren and Sanders. And you say, okay, who's going to run best against Trump and who's going to give me the policy that I want? Because ultimately at this point, what you're talking about is a kind of policy thing intertwined with the notion of electability, meaning what do I think the public wants? And how can I give the public what they want in the sense of policy? And who has the better track record in doing that? And who has the better option and plan on getting it accomplished? That should be easy. I mean, Sanders, clearly. If you get a choice, why would you choose the echo? And for the first time in your lifetime, you're getting a choice. Choose right. Choose right. A vote for Warren is a vote for Trump. You don't know the universe doesn't have politics. That's true. There might be political struggles that are happening all over place, but we're not privy to it because we're not advanced enough to recognize the wrong location relative to the struggles. Oh God, you're going to pull me into this conversation. Shaft them all. To be fair, despite being the most Googled candidate for both debates, Tulsi wasn't hitting higher than a few percentage points. Obviously, that suggests people who Googled her, didn't like what they found. Williamson, a total quack for antivirus. So, wait a minute. Gene Court, oh, thank you, man. Love the content. Well, I mean, that's not true. I mean, look. This is real clear politics. All the polling. One thing to notice, on average, Sanders is ahead of Warren, so there's that. He's been blasting out of the polls, but look at Gabbard. 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. What do you mean there's not enough support? The issue is not the support. It's not the support. The issue is that they're excluding people based on the system itself. I hope you understand the difference. It's not the Gabbard and the 17 polls that the Democratic Party gave. They weren't bitching at the 17 polls. They were bitching at the fact that it literally got boiled down to 5. If there were 17 polls between each debate, they don't send this letter. Because at that point, you can see progress or whether a person is lacking. And you can get somewhat of a fair distribution of saying, okay, look, in 6 of those polls, this person got 4, and here we are. But what ends up happening is you get 5 polls as opposed to the 17. And those 5 polls have an outsized effect of eliminating various people who have been doing well if you're going by the spirit of what this is supposed to be, meaning fairness and equity, showing that these people have a certain degree of support from the standpoint of donations and from the standpoint of polling. Polls that are just as good as the DNC are being excluded, despite the fact that the DNC broke the rules of sorts by not allowing the 17 polls to be something that is showing with a certain degree of regularity. They didn't control the polling, and yet this, you're setting a rule set on a process you don't control, and the people are calling foul because these polls aren't going with regularity. I don't necessarily think this was on purpose. I actually think this was just incompetence. But it's incompetence based on a prior rule because Tom Perez was saying an appearance of impropriety. Meaning, Tom Perez lied. All of them lied. And just said it was an appearance of impropriety. And then using the lie to construct an answer to the lie, not to the actual thing that people were complaining about. And ended up with a system like this. My issue is, it is the system itself that is excluding the candidates, and to some degree is breaking the rules that they gave them, saying that they were going to give them 17 polls. That's the issue. That's the point. That's the problem with this process. It's not that they're rigging it. It's that they're being shafted in this way using the process itself to do so. I hope you understand my point. I hope you understand what I'm getting at. There's a difference. She clearly has the support. Sparky, Warren, a total pawn in the establishment. Yes. Yes, she is. I don't doubt that Warren might do something with Wall Street. Don't doubt it at all. But a woman who laughs when Sanders does a democratic socialism speech, and really what he's talking about is like Denmark, with an added emphasis on worker co-ops, which you have no idea how much I love, with allowing companies. He came out with a newspaper plan yesterday in order to protect the press. This group that vilifies him, he wants to be able to protect the press from billionaires, to allow them to be able to do adversarial journalism and that type of stuff without any fear of recrimination from the owners of those companies, i.e. Bezos. Bezos has been attacking him with the Wall Street Journal. With the Washington Post. His response to that is adequate and correct. If you're going to attack me, fine, we need to put through legislation to change the way in which media functions to allow these particular attacks on candidates that are trying to change the system. The benevolent billionaire, which I don't think exists, but the benevolent billionaire that owns media organizations, where people who work at those organizations may be concerned with writing items that are critical of the organization itself or the other businesses associated with that, benevolent billionaire. Why wouldn't they be concerned? You worked at a paper that's owned by a billionaire, and that billionaire has a company that is shafting and screwing over its workers. And you know that if you write that particular article, it may draw a circle around the fact that you wrote that article and you work for that particular company, and may make your life miserable. Now, do you write the article? Do you feel concerned about writing the article? Think about it in the position of the individual for the moment, and just how people operate. All of them will say, no, we had no concerns about writing an article. That's not something that happens. But think about it in real terms. Would you admit to that first? And I'm telling you, self-censorship happens. Reporters, Seymour Hersh, the guy that uncovered the Mali Massacre, when he's talking about his life in politics, one of the best reporters, a newsman's newsman, says, yeah, of course, there's self-censorship. It's a job. I have a career. Even though I'm reporting a story, I am constrained by the fact that I have a job. And there may be some stories that I just can't touch because I am concerned about the retribution because of it. Not because anybody tells me so, but because I can conceptually think of a situation that they can make my life miserable. They self-censor. Would you write a story attacking a business of Jeff Bezos if you worked for Jeff Bezos? Some percentage would, I suppose. But on a probability disposition, is there a disincentive? Yes. Sanders is trying to push through legislation to get rid of that disincentive. What he wants is adversarial journalism to be able to go after plutocrats all throughout the country, because he believes that there's all sorts of corruption that take place that media doesn't cover for various reasons, sometimes some of which is that media is owned by the various same companies. Warren can say, I'm going to break up the tech companies and everything else. Sanders is talking about an outright revamping a political revolution on one sector after the next on what we call America, hitting all of those things at once. You've never seen anything like this, because nothing like this outside of maybe New Deal politics has taken place. What Sanders realized is a truth that people should have realized under Obama. I'm sorry, my mouth is dry. Is a truth that people should have realized under Obama. I'm going to pass the Obamacare, and I'm going to be slow and plodding, and I'm going to try to get Republicans. And Republicans are going to pretend that they might want a deal, in which case I'm going to water it down and water it down and water it down. And the original spirit of this notion of providing health care, gets sewn up into this notion of ideology, where we want to maintain health insurance companies to create this utopian idea to ensure people get the best of health care. meaning the government is the apparatus that's supposed to be working at the behest of the public itself. And yet, this notion of allowing insurance companies, outright leeches, that have a disincentive in this particular model to provide the thing to which you are crafting this bill for. If you are indeed working on our behalf, healthcare should be about healthcare. And insurance companies, are an unnecessary component into this particular process. And yet, that's not what was taking place. It's a utopian idea. Outright utopian. Balthazar, don't forget Streamlabs. I did. Build a brand, build a brand suspended cam. I don't know what that is. Build a brand suspended cam. Oh, Gillibrand dropped out? Christian Gillibrand dropped out. Balthazar just dropped news. Polling. If Tulsi was the most Google candidate after each debate, regardless of which polls were cherry-picked, you'd expect her to greatly increase her percentage from one poll conducted by one polling agency to the next if people liked her platform. So, yes and no. I mean, look, I don't have this, and people disagree with me on this, I'm being honest. I don't believe Tulsi was going to win. I don't even believe Tulsi was going to come close to winning. To me, this notion of attacking her, especially if you're Sanders supporters, is outright nonsense. Why would you alienate a base of people that are fired up for Tulsi? Whether that base of people is a massive amount where it can drag her to the polls to victory, I don't believe that to be true, but I do believe that there is an animated, strong support of people who like her. I am one of them. I want her on the debate stage. I didn't really care if she was the most Google person after the debate, but she was or not. I didn't see a drastic move in the polls, but nobody knew who Tulsi was. And we've only had 2 debates. And in those 2 debates, a lot of that had been taken, just by like the drama of either Sanders and Biden and Warren and that type of stuff, meaning it sucked the air out of the room and a lot of that stuff. So it's not so much that I believe a person with an anti-war platform is going to get a massive amount of support. I don't think America all that much cares about anti-war in the context of other issues. It's an issue that we say, yes, we don't necessarily like those things, true, but other things matter more. In which case, it's always a hard sell to just be an anti-war candidate, especially when there's no overt war that is taking place. If we were at war with Iran, Tulsi Gabbard's campaign would take on a different tint, but we're not. That said, that doesn't necessarily mean she's not moving in the polls. And it also doesn't mean that the cherry-picked polls, if you would agree with me that the polls are cherry-picked, then why are we having a conversation? I mean, ultimately, if there are all these listing of additional polls, and if the DNC, if you even agree with me, I could show you the letter that they said they were going to get 17 polls, and it got all the way down to 5. Come on, that's not fair. And even if you say Tulsi only got 4 polls in the context of, let's say, 17, then what does it matter? She still, based on the technical rules in that sense, would be on the debate stage. It is a fair point to say that if you tell these people that they're going to get 17 polls and it goes down to like only 5 between the 2 debates, it doesn't give them a chance to actually present themselves, A, to the American audience, and B, validate whether or not the polling allows it. There may be a spectrum of polls. For all we know, in the last 2 polls, she might hit it. She might get in on the last day with the last 2 polls. But these polls aren't coming up in that way with any level of regularity. I don't think the campaigns are insane for saying, wait a minute, this doesn't seem fair to us. Also, if you would agree with me that they're cherry picking various polls, her support doesn't necessarily need to go gangbusters. She only needs 2% in the polls. So if there are multiple polls out there that if the DNC was running polls with regularity, she may actually hit that 2% in exactly 4 polls, the last 2 happening on the last day. I hope you get my point. It doesn't really matter whether she's doing gangbusters. It only matters if she's meeting the specific criteria that the DNC is allowing. The problem is their criteria is somewhat dodgy because it doesn't necessarily allow any level of regularity to even determine whether or not that person is popular. And if we're going based on just the spirit of it and this kind of equity, there are polls out there that are just as good as the DNC polls that shows she is popular enough to be on that stage in the sense of the spirit of what they were trying to accomplish. And she has met the unique donors. Again, another level of popularity that they were trying to get across. The point and the spirit of all this was that the person had enough support, be it donations and polling, to get on the debate stage. She has those things. In the spirit of what they were trying to accomplish, she has those things. In fact, Marianne Williamson may even have those things. It wasn't Tulsi that broke the deal. It wasn't Marianne Williamson that broke the deal in the sense of, they're not asking for an expansion on it in the sense of we just want to break a deal of sorts. It's more so what you said you were going to do is not what you allowed. And you didn't control the process where you can ensure that these polls were coming out with regularity. And so instead of us getting a fair hearing where we can display that, look, these polls are showing that. Well, there are several other polls that are just as good, if not better, that are coming out with regularity that is showing that we have been up to 2% in the polls, but you don't care about those polls. You're using a very select few, that select few not coming out with any level of regularity where we can give a fair determination on whether or not the person is getting the support that you yourself are saying they need to get on the debate stage. Just saying. If we can agree that they were cherry-picking polls, we can also agree that it's possible that if they weren't cherry-picking polls, that she would have the number, even if she was barely getting over the finish line, even if it was a clunker and you had to just push it to get it over the last thing. So what? The point is, it still was gotten over there, however it got over. Just saying. Just saying. Free dogs. I don't think Bernie called out Mitch McConnell because he likes Russiagate. He wants election reform that will protect votes from the DNC domestic rigging. Yes, that's true. Like when he's in Kentucky, people were hitting Sanders because of the Russiagate stuff. I even did a video hitting him on it because I hate the Russiagate stuff. It undermines him because it looks weird. Essentially, you're talking about a subject showing that the Russia, based on what they're saying, released factually true information showing that the exact same Bernie Sanders is talking about it was being cheated. But he can never say that. He can never mention that. That has to be this taboo subject. When he talks about election integrity, it's in that context. So by definition, he has to bring up Russia. Because from the standpoint of the people he's talking about, they look at that. They're wrapped in a conspiracy theory. So from their standpoint, their world, it's the Russians. So when he talks to them, he talks about it in the context of Russia. I don't like it. It's just the way he does it. His goal in this wasn't to push Russiagate, though. His goal in this was, Mitch McConnell, you're dragging your feet on this bill for election integrity. Now, I don't know what was in that bill. It's possible that there was a poison pill in that bill. For instance, something might have said, we're going to extend voting rights to everybody so everybody can vote. In the sense of every American citizen. Well, Republicans will never do that because Republicans don't want everybody to vote. Their chances of winning the election goes down with an increase in voting. Meaning, if you had a surge of people going to the polls, it is almost a flat fact that Republicans will lose that. It's like the dealer getting a 4. Even if you have a 3, you stay. Why? Because the dealer often goes bankrupt on that particular deal just because he has certain rules that he has to attend to. He has to get 17, or he has to essentially keep going, which he has a high probability of busting. And it's not easy to do. It's to sit there with a 3. It takes stones of steel. Pass. It hurts to pass on that because it feels counterintuitive. And yet, over and over again, the dealer busts. The dealer busts. He didn't want to push Russiagate. He just didn't have a chance. I know it's like, oh, dude, you're being too soft. Think about it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. This is not mainstream media where I'm trying to drill a narrative in. What happens? Think about it. What happens if Sanders doesn't toe the Russiagate narrative? What happens? What happens? Every media thing. You don't believe in Russiagate? You don't believe in intelligence services? You don't buy it? You don't buy it? What happens? All these Democrats that want to say that, Hillary Clinton lost because of the Russians. And he's saying, no, she didn't lose because Russia. She was a horrible candidate. What happens when it says, yes, I was cheated by that? All of those things fall into play. And all of those things at this point are against Democratic dogma. If he wants to be president, he will go nowhere. I'm pushing that. I mean, come on. I think you realize I'm being honest when I say that, because it's true. He gets on stage. He wants to attack Mitch McConnell for not dealing with election integrity. So what does he do? He attacks Mitch McConnell. And he uses it in the context of, this country was cheated by the goddamn Russians, and Mitch McConnell doesn't want to do anything about it. He hits him and uses it to do so. Not that I like it, but I understand it. Our world is bigger than just us on the left. He has to talk to a larger party. Rob R. I think Kamala must have told the DNC to stop Tulsi. See, I don't think it's that overt, right? So right here, Free Docs. I don't think Bernie called out Mitch McConnell because he likes Russiagate. He wants election reform that will protect votes from DNC and domestic rigging. So there are two sides to that. That's a yes and a no. Yeah, that's a little more. There's a little bit more to that. Politics are a little bit more involved to that. A little more subtle. Bernie Sanders is attacking Mitch McConnell for election integrity, yes, and saying you're not allowing this bill to go through to protect our elections. We were assaulted, democracy was undermined, and it was the goddamn Russians. And we need to ensure that no foreign actor, because he says the Russians and anyone else, that no foreign actor adversely affects our vote. We want to be able to have sure elections where the people know. Part of democracy, necessary part of democracy, is knowing that the person you voted for is the person who wins. I mean, imagine for a moment a system where that's not necessarily true. Like, ultimately, when you see one election leader call another one and say, you won, it's ritualistic. That's true, but that ritual has a meaning. This is a changeover of power, and it's a changeover of power from one side to another side. That is somewhat of a sacred thing in which they try to keep that sacred, because outside of that is chaos. It's revolution at that point. If the political system becomes entirely untethered to the people who voted for that political system, then what is it tethered to? Because it has to be tethered to something. It can't be separate and distinct from the political body. If so, people lose faith and confidence in that system. And any notion of credibility goes out the window. It's important in the sense of voting for or being able to vote, and for the public itself to know as an absolute almost, that the vote is sacred and is legit. We don't know that right now. And the Democratic Party cheating Sanders. I mean, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it.
Well,
This election was rigged.
yeah, I think it was.
Say it again.
Yeah, I think it was.
What? Say it
It
again.
did. Meant this election was rigged.
Yeah, I think it was.
Really? You're saying you think it was?
Rigged.
Yeah, I think it was.
You mean
I
rigged?
think it was.
Rigged?
Yeah, I think it was.
You mean Democrats rigged it?
Yeah, I think it was.
No way, Liz.
Yeah, I think it was.
Come on, Liz. Are you serious?
Yeah, I think it was.
You telling me you think it was
I
rigged?
think it was.
No way.
Yeah, I think it was.
No way.
Yeah, I think it was.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, I get it. Shit, man. I get it. You
Yeah, I think it was.
get it was rigged. You get it was rigged. I get it.
I think it was.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Well,
Honestly, that's my favorite part of this video, because this is kind of getting to the point that I'm making, right? It's a big deal. It's a dramatically big deal.
I think it was.
What?
Election was rigged.
Yeah, I think it was.
Silence.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Well,
I love that. They say this election was rigged. I think it was. And there's just silence. Why do you think there's just silence there? Think about it. Why do you think there's silence in that moment? Just dead air. You know, space abhors a vacuum, right? Or nature abhors a vacuum. And yet, there you have it, a vacuum. That vacuum was created by the gravity of what was being said. One of the political parties in a democratic process decided that it was going to cheat one of the people that was running in that democratic process. This democratic process that allows us to choose who is going to be in leadership. All credibility in the world is provided based on who the person votes for. And if you decapitate that process, where it's not the person that you vote for, it's not that the person you want, it's gaming the system, then that's no longer a democratic process. That's a process that's rigged. And like Elizabeth Warren said, I think it was. And then the pregnant pause, which gets across the gravity. It's not the words that get across gravity. Again, it's the pause. Because the pause gets across what it means and how heartfelt and deeply problematic that is. This clip is awesome. Granted, Elizabeth Warren repudiated everything she just said here. She was checking the wind and she was like, oh, my bad, guys. I got it wrong. I was looking at the tea leaves. I thought you guys was going in a different direction. So I go out and correct it next time I get in front of a video. It's a big deal, man. And doing that, undermining that process, should have had consequences. Or at the very least, there needed to be some recognition of that as opposed to just lying about it. Ask Warren. I think it was. You think it was rigged? I think it was. She can't shut up about it. I think it was. Really? I think it was. How you feel? I think it was. Well, I'm not asking you. Okay, my bad. Just telling you. I think it was. I think it was. I think it was. I'm sorry. Being an asshole. Baltazar, I'm pretty sure he could have said, if, as the intelligence says, the Russians attempted to undermine our elections, we should push a system to secure them like removing cross-check. Yes. Baltazar, you're right. No, man, I agree. Fundamentally agree. Like, you can use language. You can cut your language in a way that adds ambiguity into it. You know, like, he kind of did it. I mean, saying, you know, we need to protect our systems from the Russians or anybody else that wants to get involved. Yeah, you could have said, we want to protect our systems from actors like the Russians if the intelligence on this particular thing is correct and anybody else that is trying to get it. He could have cut it a particular way. You're right. You're absolutely right. And by the way, the poison pill in that bill might have been things that would have prevented the Republicans from using stuff like interstate cross-check, at which point he would have completely been against it. But from the public standpoint, public persona, the reason I got off the mark, the reason that Sanders is doing this is because he wants to show and say, look, these guys are working with the Russians. Or at the very least, you believe that Trump was working with the Russians. You believe that Trump, you know, that we've been undermined in this country. We've been subverted. Our democracy has been, you know, usurped. So we need to do something about it. That's the way Democrats think about this stuff. They think democracy was entirely undermined by Facebook and Twitter ads. And so we need to do something about this. And we're trying to do something about this. Many of these people still think Trump worked with the Russians. Many of these people believe that Russia did something in the process of undermining our election. And that's the entire country, by the way, not just Democrats. However, the difference is the country doesn't care. The country doesn't necessarily know what it is. They just don't care. They don't think it matters. It's 1%. They just think she lost. It's Democrats that care. And he just so happens in a Democratic primary. So what do? You want election integrity. You're still running in a political race. The political opposition that is going to be potentially leader of a house if you win the presidency. Hopefully not, but maybe so. Meaning you're going to have to try to get legislation through him. And you start now attacking him by name, attacking him directly. He is getting money. He is standing in the way. He is bought, etc., etc. And you're in his state doing it. And you say, I want to ensure that elections are safe. Because after all, as you all know, which he knows they believe, true or not, he knows they believe it. So he's talking to their beliefs. We need to protect it from the Russians and anybody else. Russia, buzzword, elections, integrity, cheated, usurped, WikiLeaks, etc., etc. All of these cognitive things that just fall from this notion of Russia meddling in the elections. And he sides it too. Let's do something about it. If we're saying that this is a problem, if we're saying this took place, fair enough, let's do something about it. We should do something about it. We need to secure our elections. It's the most important thing in the world. And Mitch McConnell doesn't do anything. He says he's not doing anything. He doesn't care about securing our elections. The only appropriate action here is ridicule. Bernie Sanders has no belief. None of them have any belief that Mitch McConnell is going to do that. But that's not for Mitch McConnell to consume. That's for the audience to consume. The call and response, and they're going after Mitch McConnell in this kind of ridiculing way. The purpose of government is to work for the people of the United States. And if the people of the United States to some degree believe that there was some kind of foreign meddling in our elections, and there's this oddity where one side is saying, look, we need to secure our elections, and the other side doesn't. Despite the fact that the other side is supposed to have a fig leaf of working at the behalf of the American public. Ridicule, in this point, is used for political effect to point out that A, Trump might have worked with the Russians and that Republicans are protecting him. This is the narrative. This is what Democrats believe. And the narrative that he's hitting him with is, we are trying to secure the elections. These guys, for some reason, don't. Why? Why don't they want to secure our elections? Like, you can understand the politics. You may not necessarily like it because they're bringing up the Russia stuff, and fair enough. I hate the fact that they're using Russia in this sense. I don't have this belief, though, that Bernie Sanders escalates with Russia when he gets in office. I hope you understand my point. Whether he believes this or whether he's using this for political effect, I don't think it digs in him in this way. I think it's being used purely for political effect. He is in a Democratic primary with all sorts of people who are outright conspiracy theorists. This is the party of Rachel Maddow. On MSNBC, they deride him constantly. On CNN, they deride him constantly. On Washington Post, they deride him constantly. He doesn't get a fair shot across this notion of media. They attack him relentlessly. They don't consider him one of them. He is, after all, the independent senator from Vermont. And if you know how that process takes place in Vermont, Bernie Sanders runs as a Democrat in the Vermont race. And then at the end of that race, after he gets rid of all of the competition from Democrats, he goes back to being an independent, meaning he vanquishes the competition from the standpoint of Democrats and takes on the mantle of independent now that they are out of the way and runs against the Republican. So in that situation, the Democratic Party gets just obliterated in that process. They no longer exist. The guy who was the real Democrat of sorts beat the other people who were just Republican light. And the party ceased to exist in that context in regards to having a D or R beside your name in Vermont. They are terrified that he does the same thing as president. Imagine for the moment Sanders winning the primary, winning the presidency, and then say, I'm shedding this and I'm going to become an independent. Or worse, I'm taking on the mantle of a democratic socialist. Thanks, bitches, for getting me in office. Democratic Party, presidential Uber. I don't think he's going to do that, but they don't trust him because he's not one of them. They know it. And they also know that it is a fundamental, radical transformation of what it means to be a Democrat. It is a re-ensouling of the Democratic Party and picking up where FDR left off. And God forbid, there's a crash. God forbid there's a crash. You would get somebody who can do it right this time. The worst thing in the world for the capitalists in this country is if it all falls down and there's one Bernie Sanders, socialist, who's standing on the stage against that capitalist who was responsible for it. That is a wet dream to me. That is me touching. Hit him, Sanders! Oh, hit him! Hit him! It's not me asking for one. I'm just saying all of the indicators are pointing in that direction. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. But Balthazar, I agree with you, man. I do agree with you. Sparky, military-industrial complex blocks Tulsi via DNC. Well, look, Tulsi, they're not going to do Tulsi any favors in this sense. I mean, the ridiculing of the DNC in this case, in the rule set, is best attacked from the standpoint of the rules themselves. Not so much from the angle that they're rigging it, but they're cheating. It is hard to make the argument that they're rigging or cheating when they set the process out in front. The problem here is that the process in and of itself excludes various people from this stage. It doesn't necessarily do the intent of what it is trying to do. The way to attack the DNC and trying to get some kind of change on this particular front, be it a cacophony of noise and even certain threats about whether or not you will vote for a particular candidate, if the process is not done with a certain degree of integrity, that's something that you do as a collective in order to put pressure on the organization. I don't know if that's there, but it should be there, even if it's, like you said, Joe Rogan, my show, other shows, to hit them on this front. The attack is not, you guys are cheating, Gabbard. The attack is that your process is radically unfair and to some degree is even fraudulent on its face. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do, which is create a certain equity among the candidates. If anything, it's the opposite of that. You told these candidates that you would have 17 polls. You didn't allow them to get 17 polls because those polls are not under the control of the DNC. Nor is there any kind of relationship with these agencies to ensure that they put these polls out in a regular way and that these polls will come out between each debates. The candidates expecting a certain 17 polls. And again, it would have even been better if you would have just said, this is the criteria by which we need, meaning these are the polls. Or this is the polling criteria, meaning the polls have to meet a certain criteria in order. They could have even done that. They didn't do that. They said 17 polls, but those 17 polls eventually turned into 10. And then between debates into 5. The attack is that you didn't give us the opportunity to show whether or not the support was there because you've limited the number of polls that we can use because those polls are not coming out regularly. That's the attack point. At least I think so. That's the attack point. I don't necessarily think you get bang for your buck by saying that they were cheating Tulsi insofar as they were cheating everybody. Or at the very least, everybody that was at the low end of the totem pole from the standpoint of the debates and had a long way to go to catch up. Yeah, I think that's the argument that works. At least I think that works a little bit better. He could have taken a non-position and criticized both parties for no election reform because of it, despite not validating the Russia bait delusion. Garden, Baltazar, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Like, I agree with you. I think it's to a point, if you're sitting in Bernie Sanders' campaign room and you guys are talking about going to Kentucky and hitting Mitch McConnell, and you guys are going to say, all right, we're going to hit Mitch McConnell for election integrity. Great. All right, how do we hit Mitch McConnell for election integrity? We have to, at the very least, live up to the aspirations or live down to the opinions and the belief systems of the people who we're talking to because we need to be in alignment with them. Does taking a non-position do that? Maybe. I suppose it's the way you say it. It needs to be said in such a subtle way that there's such a fudge factor in it that nobody can point to you and say, well, this guy doesn't seem to believe the intelligence stuff because I guarantee you that they will do so. Bernie Sanders doesn't seem to buy the Russiagate stuff. Bernie Sanders' campaign was being helped by the Russians. That will come out. He has to be extremely careful of how he talks about this issue. I don't begrudge him and I give him a certain leeway on this. That's fair. It is the horse that I'm riding, and beyond that fact, from a logical sense of trying to get into office, I ask you, what would you do and what would be the repercussions of it? And what are the risks associated with what you do? And is the risk a little bit less by not doing the non-positional thing? I agree with you on that front, though, but I'm in a different position. I don't like the Russia stuff because I think it ups tensions between the countries. But again, I end up on this thing that I don't think Sanders ups tensions if he gets in office. Like, I think this is a factor of a Democratic Party thing. And if him doing what he needs to do to get out of the primary, I don't think that exceeds into the White House. Even though for every other candidate, it does. I don't like this stuff. Don't misunderstand me. But it's in a Democratic primary, meaning he's somewhat stuck doing it. I suppose you could do a non-positional position, Baltazar. So I agree with you. The only part I think I disagree with is it's a probabilistic, from a probability standpoint, the risks are higher with the non-position because you can still be castigated as taking a non-position. Meaning, you can be attacked in a way that forces you to declare your position one way or the other. I don't think you can get out of this primary without necessarily taking this tact. People can disagree with me on that, but the people who are disagreeing with me on that are more so taking this camp of he shouldn't buy into the Russiagate delusion. Well, we don't necessarily know how much you buy into it because whether he buys into it or not, if he wants to get out of the primary, he kind of has to toe a line. And it's like, well, he shouldn't toe that line, so he shouldn't be president. Well, I mean, You mean what? You mean what? How does he get through this primary without taking this position? Because media and Democratic Party itself has taken a certain conspiracy theory as just reality. It ran with it. They are wrapped into this. Media, because they sold their soul for 3 years on what amounted to a conspiracy theory. And the Democratic Party has done the same thing. And Sanders needs to become the president through the Democratic Party. How do you take a non-position in a party that is massively historical in this particular point? It's not that I like it, dude. I don't like it, Belt. And, I try to explain it only in, context of, what would you do in that situation? Because I try to put it in the sense of, from a distance, it's easy for me to hit him on this and be like, hate this Russiagate nonsense. It's not the Russians, it's the Republicans, etc., etc. But when you are talking to a Democrat, and I talk to Democrats, they are not there. They're not there. In their mind, Hillary Clinton lost to the Russians. Donald Trump was working with the Russians. They are in a conspiracy theory. Outright conspiracy theory. Sanders needs to win a section of those people. And he has certain walls that he can break. All sorts of radical transformations to all of these various areas of the political system. And they hate him for it. He is not a member of their class. And he revels to some degree in that fight because he uses that fight in a way that the public is with him on it. Because they don't like the way media talks about things that is kind of out of touch. And when he bashes them for being dishonest, well, they are being dishonest. It's not like Trump. They are being dishonest. And he can show where they're being dishonest. People like me can show where they're being dishonest. It's different. It's a different animal. He doesn't... There's certain walls he can break and there's certain walls he can't. Adolf Hitler tried to go in war at all fronts. And I don't think he can do such. There's only finite resources. And I say that to say is there's certain things, headwinds that you take on. Certain ones you don't. The Russiagate stuff is when he's decided no. Everybody will be against him. Like there's no way of getting through a Democratic Party primary not pushing this nonsense. I don't like it. It's just kind of somewhat of a fact-based, thing. It's like Bernie Sanders can say, okay, I'm not going to run for president or I'm not going to try to win for president. But let's be honest. The moment that you set a priority, whatever the priority is, everything else is subordinate to the priority. Doesn't matter what it is. Pick anything where the priority is important. The presidency, trying to win at chess, trying to do this, trying to do that. There's certain things where you say, okay, there's ethical considerations that come into play. Fair enough, that's true. When I'm playing chess, there's certain ethical considerations. I'm not cheating and everything else. But when the context of that, winning is the ultimate priority. Well, there's no different in a political campaign or in a military campaign. The goal is to win the presidency. Great. What do you do to win it? All right, I need to push these policies, etc., etc. What are the flat you're willing to take in the various areas, etc.? You weigh those things. And then when you look at the Russiagate stuff, there is no upside to going against the grain. There is zero upside. There are people who are on the left who hates it. Fair enough, but the rest of the country, nothing's it. He could hit this purely as a political touchstone. It matters more to us in our mind because we have been pushing against this from day one. So the weight of this means more to us. The rest of the public doesn't care about the Russiagate stuff. This is background theater of sorts. His point is election integrity. He uses this as a pivot to it. People get pissed off by it. I get pissed off by it. But at the very least, you got to understand where he's coming from with it and ask yourself the secondary question of can you win by essentially going on mainstream media and running into every Democratic debate where they are deriding you for not listening to the intelligence and not believing this other stuff. I mean, that's not a wall that you necessarily want to try to run through. There's no running through that wall, especially in a Democratic primary. If you're out the primaries, maybe. Many of those Democrats have nowhere else to go. I think you may, screw yourself over with that. And if I was running, I probably would do the exact same thing. And if I'm being honest, everybody here, everybody who's even deriding him on this would do the exact same thing. The moment that I have the opportunity to win the presidency, this notion of hitting every ethical and moral point goes out the window. You have obligations. You work between lines. There's some lines you can break. There's some lines you can't. You choose. You choose. The Russiagate is not one to break. I'm just saying. Especially in a Democratic primary. Sparky, establishment fears Bernie's double cross. Yes, Bernie ran a 4.36 mile in high school, by the way. Nice. He had a lucky strike hanging out of his mouth. No way, no way. He was running a marathon with a cigarette in his mouth. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to let this be there because this video has gone way, way too long. Baltazar, could Gabbard try the screw you guys, I'm running third if they keep excluding her just to test the waters if they cheat Bernie? That's an interesting one, Baltazar. So I was thinking about that too. Someone else asked me about that. One of my subscribers asked me if Tulsi could run in the Green Party. And I kind of just made this point that if Tulsi ran in the Green Party, she is still a Democrat. She could be, I would imagine there has to be some process by which you could expel the person. I mean, but she would be, it's unfair to the people of Hawaii who voted for a Democrat for her to change her affiliation to a Green Party. That's the first point. The second point, the Democratic Party would punish her if she did that, I would imagine, in some way. I mean, they already greatly dislike her. But if she is going to literally, as a congressman that's a Democrat, run in the Green Party presidency, that is not going to go over well. All of this is fraught with problems. It is unclear even whether the Green Party, the Green Party has certain problems associated with it. And Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have the name recognition to bring them up out of their problems and their quagmire. There's no upside for her to run with the Green Party in this sense. If she runs as somewhat of an independent test the waters, again, you're stuck in this quagmire of no one sees her. She goes out of the public limelight. She just falls away. Tulsi's best shot of getting support and people to know her is in those debates. The attack that needs to be used is attacking the DNC for this kind of gamey of the system of sorts by having less and less debates despite telling the candidate something different. Meaning, you told me I had 17 debates. In actuality, I have 5. You cheated me. I think that's the strongest attack point. I mean, Tulsi shouldn't run as a third party. You don't want her to be excluded or to be ignored. You want her to be on that stage. Meaning every attack, every push, every scream, yell, petition, all that stuff needs to be applied into trying to get her on that stage based on a rule set that the Democratic Party themselves created. Hang them by their own rules. It's my point. Your strongest attack is ridicule in this sense. Outright ridicule. And bringing up the fact that the reason that they're going with this particular bogus system is because they didn't want to deal with the fact that they cheated the last guy. Meaning all of this horrible system has to do with a mistaken premise. There wasn't an appearance of impropriety, Tom. You actually did cheat Sanders. And you, in this weird warped way, constructed the system that you have now that's excluding candidates because you didn't want to own up to the fact that you cheated a guy. Ridicule, and more ridicule. The system is shabby at best. And if the intent of the system was to ensure that people had support and publicity, she clearly has those things. Joking about Lucky Strike, but Bernie ran a 4.3. Okay. I mean, this was what, the 70s, 80s? I wouldn't be shocked if he had a Lucky Strike in his mouth. So, yeah. All right, guys. I'm going to end this. This video is gone for 2 hours. Oh, fuck's sake, for 2 hours. I'm going to have to cut this video. All right. Yeah, I'm getting tired. Share. Subscribe. Yeah, man. Look. I don't like that she's being shafted. And the DNC, reason for the shafting her, ultimately, the system itself that they've constructed is based on a lie. It is based on a lie. And again, if you don't believe it's based on a lie, it's based on the notion that there was an appearance of impropriety. But Elizabeth Warren just told me
meant this election was rigged.
Yeah, I think it was.
Elizabeth Warren just told me, the woman who's running in the race, who's like number 3, that there was impropriety, that there was rigging. And so if you make a system that goes with this notion of an appearance of impropriety, then the system in and of itself is flawed, because the system is based off of something that Elizabeth Warren said was essentially a rigged race that you were saying wasn't rigged. The flawed system that you constructed, that is supposed to be equitable, is now excluding people. The system itself is excluding people. You told them 17. Now they only have 5. Tulsi should be allowed in the debates. If there are 4 polls that are just as good, if not better, than the Democratic polls, and if you cannot produce the other 17 for us to kind of test and gauge between the debates, then you should open it to other polls that are just as good and the efficacy done just as well. Meaning, I said that in a weird way, the word doesn't match. But essentially, the methodology of it does just as well. They should be open, considering there was a certain degree of incompetence in constructing a flawed system based on a false, flawed premise. Open the debates. You should open the debates to Gabbard and to Williamson, if the polls, at the very least, or she could come up with, again, polls that meet a certain criteria. Because my thing is this. If you say, look, we need this particular level of professionality and methodology of the polling that we're using, we understand that 5 polls is insufficient to get a really good testing of the waters. So fair enough. You're right. We messed up. We're going to open it up to additional polls that have the methodology, at the very least, that we deem appropriate. I mean, it wasn't them that messed up. It wasn't them that messed up. I'll end this here. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.